Hey, my name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Today we're continuing work we did last time on this fully responsive site. It's got a bunch of kind of cool features here, but as you click here or scroll down, you see all these posts, and you can hover over them and show this effect. But the cool thing is you can search for stuff like beef or whatever, and it will pull up, and it'll search the title, these tags, and this description text, and you can quickly jump into any post. So if you like this kind of thing, we're building it completely with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Today we're working on the CSS, and so go ahead if you haven't watched that first video and watch it, and then jump right back into this one, and then next time we will look at the JavaScript. I'll warn you that today will probably be the longest of the videos, because there's just a lot of CSS to write to get this to look right. Last time we set this up with Parcel, so we've got it kind of hot reloading over here, and you'll see we have exactly zero styling going on. So let's jump right in and start working this out. First of all, I've got just this little shortcut that's just going to pop out some basic clears. And then we want to actually establish a few things. First of all, we're going to set up some variables. And I typically like to just go ahead and write these as normal CSS variables so we can control them with JavaScript if we need to. Obviously, we're writing in Sass, so we could use like the whole $sign thing and write it that way. But for now, we're just going to do it like this. And we've got, for this dark variable, this is kind of our dark color. We're going to do 002A32. And then for gray, we're going to come down here and do 6B7577. All right, let me go ahead and fill in some of these so you don't have to watch me do it the whole time. And then I'll be right back with you. Okay, we've added a light transparent and we've added a light gradient. I usually get gradients from there's tons of sites that'll give you gradients, and so I just played around with one and grabbed one, and we're going to use that to overlay it over our hero image up top that we're going to put this way. There will be more that we'll do here, but let's just start with this. We'll come down here and grab the body and the HTML. We'll go font family. Poppins is our font, and sans serif. We just grab Poppins from Google Fonts. And then let's grab our color, and we're going to use that dark for all the text. And now we're going to jump around with this little button here. When we click, it jumps down. Right now it's kind of harsh, you'll see, but let's go ahead and add something that's a little smoother here. So we'll say scroll behavior of smooth. And now when we come over here and click, with that one little line, it just scrolls down real smoothly, which is kind of cool. Next, let's work on that nav bar. Let's scroll up here so we can see it. And that had a class of main nav on it. We want that to be position of fixed, which will kind of pull it out of the flow and place it up top. Next, let's do z index of like 100, so it's on top of everything, and the width of 100%. We'll do a padding of 1 rem up and down and 2 rem right to left. And we are going to put a little transition on this because we're going to change the background color on scroll in JavaScript. Let's go ahead and say transition. And to make this a little easier, why don't we add this as another variable? So come up here and say transition. We'll do like all, 200 milliseconds. And then we'll do ease in, out. And that means we can come down here and say var transition. We'll just grab it that way. That way we can use that all throughout the document and just kind of have everything share that same transition. All right, next let's go ahead and we're going to just stack this inside here since we're using CSS or SCSS, and we want to display flex on our nav list. And as I save it here, you'll notice they go up right next to each other. We'll do justify content of center so they stay right in the middle of the page there, and then a list style of none, and we'll do a gap of 2 rem. Now this will only work, I think, in Firefox and Chrome, but it's coming to Safari at some point, so you could actually go in here and grab those LIs and just add like the second one. You could add margin to either side or margin to all of them, but for now it's quicker just to do it that way. All right, next we're going to come in here and grab the links. Those are the A tags inside those LIs. We'll say text decoration of none, and we'll say text transform of uppercase, and a letter spacing of 1 pixel. Now because these are link tags, we're also going to add a couple other, attributes here. So we'll grab the visited, the link, and the active. For all of these, we want a color of our var light. And you'll see that there they are. They show up right there for us. Let me make sure I grabbed that correctly. Let's see, grab light. And I think I actually added that as the light. And this should have been the gray because that color doesn't look dark enough. And then let's grab our light of EFF5F7. And as I save, you'll see, yeah, those look more like what we're looking for. Okay, I'll come back down here. We are going to have some kind of hover effect on these. So let's go ahead and do a transition of our var transition. And we're going to toggle on kind of a different look on this navbar with a class in JavaScript, and we're going to call it apply background. And here we're going to do background color of our var light transparent. We'll do a box shadow of 0, that's left and right. Up and down 3 pixels, we'll have a blur of 2 pixels, and RGBA 10, 15, 54, which is like a dark blue, 0.1. And whenever that apply background is there, we want to grab our nav link again. I'm going to grab all the same stuff right here because we're going to add a transition on these that'll change the color to our var of dark. And we'll add a font weight just for kicks of 600. So we've got our nav pretty much ready to go up here. Now you can't see the applied color, but let's go ahead and add that briefly here. Maybe the easiest thing would be to come over here and jump up to our nav. And here we will add apply background. We save it there, you see that's what we've got going on, this little area here. Now there's something else you'll notice. When we click here, it jumps to this section, but this navbar is now kind of covering that whole area. So there's actually kind of a cool trick we can do, and that is, let's go ahead and add another variable up here. We're going to call this variable nav height. All right, and we could actually set this with JavaScript on page load, but we'll just set it to like 4 REM, something like that. Then what we can do is the scroll behavior smooth. We can say scroll padding top. In other words, when you scroll, we want you to leave this amount of padding up top. We're going to set that to our nav height. And now what's going to happen is if I come over this way again and I hit this scroll button, it's going to actually scroll and leave 4 rem up top from whatever the thing is we're scrolling to. So that's kind of a cool trick, a kind of hack you can do. It's not a hack, it's a feature of CSS that a lot of people don't know about. Otherwise, you've got to mess around with a bunch of kind of weird JavaScript to do something that CSS can do natively. Next area we want to work on is this kind of whole hero area. And we give that a class of hero. First thing we're going to do is apply that background image. And it's in our images folder. And we just called it header. All right, you'll see it shows up there when I save. Let's change the background size to cover. So we make sure to kind of stretch it as we move. And background position to center. Place it exactly in the center as we move and change the page. Now we want a height of 100 view height. This will ensure that whenever we load the page, that area will always take up 100 view height. Next, we're going to add a display of grid here and place item center. That will place all of that text directly in the center area. And we'll say text align of center. And the color for all that, we want to be var of light. So different than our normal kind of body. And then position of relative. If we come over here and scroll back up, you'll see that's taking up 100 view height, which is exactly kind of what we want. Now, right now, place item center is placing these things in the center and spreading them out. We're going to make this little chevron position absolute. So right now, it's kind of messing up our flow here, but we'll figure that out in just a second. All right, now I mentioned we want some kind of a gradient to go over this picture to make it a little easier to work with. So we're going to come in here and grab an after element. And we'll do content of nothing. And then we'll do a full absolute, which I've just got this little shortcut that pops that in there for us. A background color. Actually, I guess just a background because we're going to use a gradient, our light gradient. If we save it there, you see it pull up exactly like we'd want it to. Now we want it to actually be behind that text. So let's do a z index of 0. And then that text should actually come up above that here. In just a moment, we'll switch that around. I guess let's do this -1. Now that pulls it behind the image. Okay, so The next thing we want to do is you'll notice when we did this HTML, we stacked stuff like hero and then 2 underscores description. And we did that so that it'd be easier in our Sass. So now we can come in here and simply do the 2 underscores description, and it's going to go ahead and apply this hero and description. We don't have to type out quite as much. Here we're going to do a position of relative and a z-index of 1. This is this kind of description area here. All right, and inside here we've got our h1. We're going to give this a font size of 3.5 rem. And then below we've got a p tag here, and we're going to give this a font size of 1.5 rem. I mentioned we were going to grab that arrow. It's got the same kind of setup here, where we have it as hero double underscore arrow. And here we want this to be a position of absolute. We're going to keep it off the bottom of that hero area, 5 pixels up, and a z-index of 1 as well, so it stays on top of everything else. And you see it's positioned now just where we want, and this is staying directly in the center, which is cool. That's kind of what we're looking for. Let me zoom this out. I think I've got it zoomed in a little bit. And there we go. Now because it's inside a link tag, or this is a link tag rather, we're going to come in here and we want to grab the link and the visited, and we'll grab the active as well. And for here, we're going to say color of var light. And again, because we have that SVG as inline, it should actually update to be that same color that we need. This should be active. There we go. And then when we either hover or we focus, let's do something kind of fun here. So first of all, we're going to take off the outline that will be normal for the focus state, which you normally shouldn't do unless you can make it really obvious that somebody's selecting it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make it embarrassingly obvious. All right, next we're going to put our transition on here, the same variable we've been using for all the other transitions. And then let's go ahead and build out kind of this custom animation. So we'll say keyframes, and we're going to just call it bounce. And you can actually stack where you want this to work. So at 25% and 75%, we want it to transform, and we're going to say translate Y, negative 10%, and scale of 1.2. Then let's go ahead and copy this down, and we're going to say that at 0 and at 50, we want this to go back to 0, and we're going to keep our scale just where it's at. Now we can come back up to our hover and our focus state, and we can add that animation. So we can say animation. First of all, you give it the name, bounce. Then we'll give it a time period. So we'll say over 1 second, and we'll say infinite. All right, so it's just going to keep going forever. And now when we come over here and hover, let's see, what did we do wrong? Animation, bounce. I see we've got a problem here. We have spaces on the scale. We don't need that. Save it, come back over here, and now we're getting our little bounce feature. You'll see it's just kind of hopping up and down just like we'd want it to. So that's kind of playful, and even though we've taken the outline off, it's kind of obvious when you're hovering or when you're focused on this button. All right, hang in there. We are getting halfway through. All right, now we've got this header and we've got this input field. So let's focus on those next. So I'll come down here and let's get a little more space. Okay, we're going to grab our H2 here and we'll say font size of 2 rem and text align center. And we're going to do margin 2 rem up top, 2 rem side to side, and 1.5 rem down below. Then let's grab our input field. Now by default, most browsers will apply their own styling to this. So let's do some things to kind of counter that. We want this font family to inherit from our body, and the same thing for the font size. Now by default, these input fields will be display block or display inline block. So let's go ahead and make it display block. And then we'll say we want the width. We're going to do a little calc here to be 100% of the kind of the parent container minus 4 rem to make sure it stays off the sides. We'll do a max width of 500 pixels so that as the screen grows, it won't get any bigger than that. Padding of 0.5 rem. This is the actual text area inside. And 0.8 rem, so that's up and down and left and right. We'll definitely want to put margin of auto side to side. We'll do up and down of 0, so that way it's always positioned in the middle of the screen that like aligns at center. Finally, we're going to add a border bottom, 3 pixels solid, and we're going to use our gray variable. So as I say here, you'll see it pull up right this way, but we've still got some styling things we need to work on. Number one, it's border bottom and not border borum, all right? And you'll see it show up there. But next, let's actually work on that focus state. So we'll say a focus. When it's focused, we don't want that outline on it, but we're going to go ahead and change this border, and we want it to be dark. And we also want to grab our placeholder when we're focusing. So we'll grab our placeholder here. We'll say that we also want that to change color to be color dark. So as we come in here and click, you'll see that changes, and then we should actually be changing this border bottom to dark as well. Again, I come in here and click, and both of those change color for us. Next section to work on is our actual blog posts. We just called that blog posts, and this is kind of the master container that holds it all. We'll do display grid and place items center, padding of 2.5 rem up and down, and 2 rem right and left, and a max width of 1000 pixels. So it never gets bigger than that. This is the container that holds that grid of cards. Obviously, we want to make sure it's margin auto so that as it grows and shrinks, it doesn't hug the left side of the page when it gets larger than 1000 pixels. Inside here, we had our card container. Here we're going to do display grid, and then we're going to do grid template columns, and we're going to use grid so that things will always kind of be the same. We won't have a card stretching all the way to fill like you would with flex, although you can change that with flex, but I think it's just a little easier here. So we can say repeat and say auto fill, min max, 250 pixels, and 1 fraction. Now we're not going to see too much effect when we change because these images are so large, but as we were to pull these out, you'll see that another one tries to fit in, and then finally a third one can fit in, but that's all it's going to be able to fit in our 1000 pixels that we gave it here. It'll then stretch to kind of fill that area and fit as many of these 250s as it can in there. Now because it's display grid, we can actually just add a grid gap to it. We'll do a grid gap of 2 rem. And unlike the gap of flex, grid gap has pretty good support across the browsers. Now we've got those articles themselves that we called cards. For these, we're going to say position relative because we're going to use some absolute positioning. So let's go ahead and get that on there now. Again, these will be display grid, and align content will be space between. This will move everything kind of to the outside corners, like a display flex with space between left and right, except this will do it up and down as it's on display grid here. Next, we're going to actually set a definite height on this, which I normally don't do, but I think you'll see that that will make for kind of a better user experience. And then an overflow of hidden. Now right now that's going to hide quite a bit, including the images, but you're starting to see it take shape. And again, as we move, it will kind of auto be responsive without any kind of meaty queries at all. In fact, we're not going to use any in this entire project because display grid is awesome. Now again, because we're using Sass and the way we named our variables, we can come in here and say card description. We're just going to set this to an opacity of 0 and a padding of 1.5 rem. And then we're going to add that same transition. And right now that's going to fade them away, but we'll bring them back. Don't worry. All right, let's grab the image now. And this is where we're going to position as absolute. Once again, I'll use my little shortcut to jump that out here. We want to make sure that the image is 100% width. And then we want to make sure that it's 100% height. And that's going to squash the images. So we want to do object fit of cover. Next, we'll do z-index of -1, and that'll put it behind the text. And then we're going to use that same transition that we set up above. All right, next, let's come down here. We're going to grab the card metadata. We'll say card meta. We're going to set that to a background color of var, and we're going to grab our light transparent. We'll do a padding of 1.5 rem. And again, if it's not already a worn out trope, we are going to add our transition in here again. Now, all this card meta is also kind of used the same way, except we've got these double dashes instead. We've got a title here. We're going to do font size of 1.2 rem, display block, margin bottom of 1 rem, and a font weight of 600. We'll change the color here to our var dark, and we'll do a text decoration, since it's a link here, of none. Next, let's grab the tag list. This tag list is the div that holds our tags, and we're going to put a display flex on that, and a flex wrap of wrap, and a list style of none. Once again, let's add a gap on here, and we'll do like 0.5 rem, and that'll space it out nicely. Again, that's not supported, I think, on Safari, so you probably are going to want to do like a margin on the actual A tags down here, but for now, we're just not going to worry about that. Come in here and say for our item, we're going to do a padding of 0.5 rem and 0.9 rem. A background color, we're going to use our var of dark. And then our color, for the actual text, we'll use the var of light. Text decoration here, we will have a text decoration of none. And already we're almost there. You can see we've got stuff stacked up nicely. If we were to hover over this, things start to bounce. We jump down here, we've got that padding. Now we're going to have to add this transition up here with JavaScript, but for now, this is where we stand. We've got a couple other things to do just with the way this hovers. So now what we want to do is we want to jump out to the actual card here. We've got this purple bracket. Let's find our purple bracket here. We're going to come right in here, and we're going to say that when we hover over that card, we want a bunch of stuff to happen. So we hover over that card. The first thing we want to do is we want to grab our after element. We're going to say that we want the content of that. We're going to add our own little kind of this white background here. We're going to have the whole card fill with that. So again, we're going to grab our shortcut to grab our position absolute, top, left, right, and bottom here. We're going to change the background color to our var of light transparent and do a z index of -1. If we hover over this, you'll see that that's exactly what happens. It's a little rough right now. We'll fix that in a moment. In addition to that after element, we're going to grab our card description. We're going to set an opacity of 1 to that. And our card image, we're going to transform scale 1.2. Lastly, we're going to grab our card meta and change the background color to transparent so that we don't double up on this white background as we come. So if I now come over here and I hover over this, you'll see that's the effect we're getting. Everything's kind of zooming up just as we want it to. This little section here loses its background. We've set that to transparent, but the whole area gets that same color kind of over the whole picture. You'll notice we've got this transitioning nicely. Let's make sure that we've got a transition up above here. Let me grab this transition on the actual card. Did we add one? I didn't think so. Okay, it looked a little rough to me. Now if we come back here, we hover over it, it's just a little softer, and that will work nicely. All right, so that is all the CSS. Thanks for hanging in there for a long video. I know it went kind of fast, but I didn't want this to be forever long. A lot of those shortcuts are just like Emmet filling out, or there are things that I've just custom added as like little shortcuts with Text Expander or some other program you can use, and that'll make things a little faster for you. All right, next time we're going to look at the JavaScript, which will be actually quite a short video. We're just going to work on this intersection observer to get this background class to show up, and then we're going to work on creating a filter here, which, believe it or not, is not a lot of work. Thanks so much for watching, and happy coding.